Lena had loved Damien for years, not just any love, the kind that burned, the kind that made her stomach twist whenever he walked into a room, the kind that made her heart race whenever he so much as looked her way. But the problem was, Damien didn't look her way. Not in the way she wanted. He was everything she had ever dreamed of in a man. Tall, dangerously handsome, and so wealthy that people whispered his name in admiration and envy. He had built an empire from nothing, turning his business into one of the biggest in the country. Every woman wanted him, and many had tried to have him. Some succeeded, but none ever stayed for long. Lena worked for him. Well, not directly. She was just another employee in one of his many companies, lost in the sea of workers he barely noticed. But she noticed him. Every single thing about him. The way he moved, the way his deep voice commanded attention, the way his dark eyes seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. She had spent years hoping, waiting, dreaming that one day he would see her. But he never did. She watched as he dated models, actresses, powerful women, women who had everything she didn't. They had beauty, money, influence. They wore designer dresses, walked into the most exclusive places as if they owned the world. And Lena? She was just Lena. A woman with a simple life, a simple job, and a heart that ached every time she saw him with someone else. One night, at a company event, she gathered the courage to speak to him. She had spent hours preparing, choosing the perfect dress, styling her hair just right, practicing words in the mirror. She wasn't a fool. She knew she wasn't the kind of woman he usually went for. But she had something those women didn't. She had love. Real, deep, unshakable love. She approached him at the bar, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. He turned, looked at her, and for a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw something in his eyes. Curiosity? Interest? But then he smiled, the polite, distant smile he gave to people he barely noticed. "Hey, you work for me, don't you?" His voice was smooth, effortless. Lena swallowed, nodding. "Yes, in the marketing department." He nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "That's nice. Enjoying the party?" She wanted to say something that would make him see her, really see her. But before she could, a tall, stunning woman slid her arms around his waist, whispering something in his ear. He chuckled, turning away from Lena completely, his attention now on the woman who had just claimed him. Lena stood there, feeling invisible. That night, she cried. Not because of humiliation, but because of the truth. Damien would never love her. No matter what she did, no matter how much she loved him, he would never look at her the way he looked at those women. Until she heard about the charm. It started as a whisper. A story passed around in hushed voices, in secret conversations. A charm deep in the heart of Africa that could make any man fall in love. A charm so powerful, so dangerous, that it was said to work without fail. Lena laughed when she first heard it. It sounded ridiculous, like something out of a movie. But as the days passed, the idea stuck in her mind like an itch she couldn't scratch. She found herself researching, digging, trying to find out if it was real. And then she found someone who had done it. A woman in an online forum, hidden behind an anonymous profile, told a story that sent shivers down Lena's spine. She had used the charm. She had made the man she loved fall so deeply, so obsessively in love with her, that he had abandoned everything for her. It had worked, but at a price. Lena ignored the warning. One night, after another painful evening of watching Damien with someone else, she made her decision. She booked a flight to Africa. It was crazy, insane, but she was desperate. When she landed, the heat hit her like a wave. The air was thick, heavy with a scent she couldn't place. She followed the instructions given to her by a nameless source, a journey deep into a village untouched by time. The further she traveled, the more she felt like she was stepping into another world. And then she met her. An old woman, her face lined with age, her eyes filled with something Lena couldn't understand. She sat in a small, candlelit room, staring at Lena as if she already knew why she was there. "You came for the charm," the woman said. It wasn't a question. Lena hesitated, her throat dry. "Yes." The woman studied her for a long time before speaking. "Love that is forced is never real. You will get what you want, but it will cost you." Lena swallowed hard, her mind screaming at her to turn back. But her heart, the part of her that had loved Damien for years, refused to listen. "I don't care about the cost," she said. "I just want him to love me." The woman nodded slowly. "Then you shall have it." Lena watched as she pulled out a small, delicate charm, innocent-looking, yet pulsing with something Lena couldn't explain. The woman placed it in her palm, her fingers cold as ice. "Once he touches this, his heart will belong to you," the woman said. "But remember, once the heart is stolen, it cannot be returned." Lena gripped the charm, her heart pounding. She didn't care. Damien would love her. That was all that mattered. Lena's fingers curled tightly around the charm as she left the old woman's small, candlelit room. The words echoed in her mind like an eerie warning. Once the heart is stolen, it cannot be returned. But did it really matter? For years, she had watched Damien fall for woman after woman, ignoring her as if she were just another face in the crowd. She had cried herself to sleep too many nights, hoping, praying that he would one day see her. If this was what it took to make him love her, then so be it. As she made her way back to the city, a strange feeling settled in her chest, excitement mixed with something deeper. Something she didn't want to name. It wasn't fear. It wasn't regret. It was something else. Something dark. But she pushed it aside. The moment her plane touched down back home, Lena felt like a different woman. She had power now. She had something no other woman in Damien's life had. She had the key to his heart. The only thing left was to use it. It had to be subtle. The old woman had given her specific instructions. Damien had to touch the charm with his bare hands. It didn't need rituals or blood or chanting. No, it worked in silence, creeping into his mind the moment his skin made contact with it. So Lena planned. She knew his routines. She knew where he would be, what he would touch, and she had the perfect opportunity coming up, the annual company gala. Damien would be there, charming the room, surrounded by women desperate for his attention. But this time, Lena wouldn't be just another face in the background. She would be the one he couldn't resist. The night of the gala, Lena took extra care. She wore a dress that hugged her body in all the right places, elegant yet unforgettable. Her makeup was flawless, her hair cascading in soft waves down her shoulders. But the real secret was tucked inside her small purse, the charm. She had thought long and hard about how to make him touch it. It had to be natural, effortless. And then an idea struck. As she entered the ballroom, her eyes scanned the room until they landed on him, Damien. He stood near the bar, dressed in a sharp black suit, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He was deep in conversation with a group of high-profile businessmen, his laughter smooth, confident. And by his side, a woman. Of course. She was tall, breathtakingly beautiful, her long red dress hugging her curves like a second skin. She had the kind of beauty that turned heads effortlessly. And Damien was giving her his full attention. Lena's stomach twisted, but she refused to feel defeated. She straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked straight toward him. As she approached, Damien's gaze flicked toward her, and for the first time, something in his expression changed. His eyes lingered, scanning her from head to toe. "Good. Damien," she greeted smoothly, ignoring the woman by his side. "I was hoping to steal you for a dance." The red-dressed woman raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. But Lena didn't care. Damien smirked, amusement flashing in his eyes. "Lena, right?" Right. That was all she had ever been to him. Just a name, just another employee. But not for long. She held up her hand, revealing the small, delicate charm she had transformed into a keychain. "I had this made for you," she said, voice light, teasing. "A lucky charm for your empire." He raised an eyebrow but reached for it without hesitation. And then it happened. The moment his fingers brushed against it, Lena swore she felt something shift in the air. A flicker, a tension so subtle it could have been imagined. Damien's fingers lingered on the charm, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if something unseen had just taken root in his mind. For a split second, his grip on the keychain tightened. And then, just as quickly, he let go, chuckling softly. "Lucky charm, huh?" he mused, pocketing it without a second thought. "I could use some luck." Lena smiled. He had no idea what he had just done. The rest of the night felt like a blur. She danced, drank, laughed, but her eyes never left Damien. She waited, watching, wondering when it would start. At first, he seemed the same. He still laughed with his business partners, still entertained the beautiful woman by his side. But then, slowly, something changed. His gaze began to wander, flicking toward Lena more and more often. A frown creased his brow, as if something was pulling his attention away from everything else. And then, out of nowhere, he excused himself from the woman, from his business partners, and walked straight toward her. Lena's heart pounded. Damien stopped just inches from her, his expression unreadable. "You leaving so soon?" he asked. His voice was different, lower, softer. Lena swallowed, playing innocent. "Why? Would you miss me?" Something flashed in his eyes, something Lena had never seen before. Hunger, curiosity, need, and then, without warning, he reached for her hand. His touch was warmer than she remembered, almost too warm, as if something inside him had just woken up. "Stay," he murmured. "I want to talk to you." Lena's breath caught. Damien wanted to talk to her. Damien was choosing her over the stunning woman he had been with all night. It was working. It was really, truly working. She let him lead her toward a quieter part of the ballroom, her pulse racing with triumph. For the first time in her life, Damien was looking at her as if she was the only woman in the room, as if he couldn't take his eyes off her. And that was just the beginning. Lena could barely breathe. Damien's hand was still wrapped around hers, his grip firm, warm, possessive. She had spent years dreaming of this moment, but now that it was happening, she felt something strange creeping in. Was it excitement? Victory? Or something darker? Whatever it was, she pushed it aside. He was looking at her like she was the only woman in the room, like no one else mattered. And that was all that mattered. He led her through the crowded ballroom, past wide-eyed guests who noticed the sudden change. People whispered, heads turned. Even the woman in the red dress, who had been draped over him all night, stared in shock. But Damien didn't seem to care. He pulled Lena outside onto the private balcony, the night air cool against her skin. The city lights stretched out below them, glittering, endless. "Tell me," he said, his voice quieter now, almost uncertain. "How come I've never really noticed you before?" Lena's heart skipped. She smiled, tilting her head. "Maybe you weren't looking hard enough." His lips curled into a slow smirk, but there was something else in his gaze. Confusion, intrigue, obsession. The charm was working. Lena could feel it. The shift. Damien, the man who had always been untouchable, distant, was now drawn to her. He looked at her as if he was trying to figure out why he suddenly needed her. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "Where have you been hiding?" She let out a soft laugh. "I've always been around. You just never cared to ask." Something flickered in his eyes. And then, before she could say another word, he reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Lena's breath hitched. Damien never touched her before. Not like this. His fingers lingered, his eyes darkening with something she recognized. Desire. It was happening so fast, and yet it felt so real. He exhaled, almost as if he was frustrated. "I don't know what it is about you, but I can't stop thinking about you." Lena's stomach clenched. There it was, the words she had been waiting for. He wasn't just noticing her. He was obsessing over her. She wanted to revel in the victory. To let herself fully enjoy the fact that she had done it, she had finally made him hers. But then, something unexpected happened. Damien took a step closer, his voice lower now, more intense. "I want to see you again, alone." Lena's breath caught. "Alone?" He nodded. "Tomorrow night, my place. His place." She had imagined this moment for years, but the reality of it sent a shiver down her spine. Because suddenly, the thought hit her. What if this wasn't love? What if this was something else? What if the charm was working too well? What if Damien's feelings weren't just growing, but turning into something dangerous? Still, she couldn't back out now. She had fought too hard, gone too far, so she smiled, nodded, and said, "I'll be there." The next evening, Lena stood in front of Damien's penthouse, her heart pounding. She had never been this close to his world before. The man who had once ignored her was now desperate to have her near. But as she raised her hand to knock, the door swung open, as if he had been waiting for her. "Lena." His voice sent chills down her spine. It was deeper now, more intense. He pulled her inside, shutting the door behind them. The penthouse was exactly as she had imagined, sleek, modern, expensive. But she barely had time to take it all in before he was in front of her again, watching her, studying her. She felt exposed under his gaze. "You look beautiful," he murmured. Lena's breath hitched. This wasn't a game anymore. This was real. He reached for her hand again, his fingers warm against her skin. But this time, something was different. His grip was tighter, his breathing slightly uneven, and then his next words sent a chill down her spine. "I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted. "It's like I need you. Every second, every moment." Lena swallowed. It was working. Too well. Damien wasn't just falling for her. He was obsessing over her. She had won. But for the first time since she started this, she felt something cold slip into her veins. Fear. Because suddenly, she wasn't sure if she had control anymore, or if the charm had turned Damien into something dangerous. Lena had won. Damien was hers. But as she stood in the middle of his penthouse, her heart pounding, she realized something terrifying. She was not in control anymore. Damien wasn't just in love with her. He was obsessed. And obsession was far more dangerous than love. His eyes burned with an intensity she had never seen before. The confident, untouchable billionaire she had admired for years was gone. In his place was a man whose entire world now revolved around her, a man who would do anything to keep her. And that's when she knew she had made a mistake. That night, Damien didn't let her leave. At first, it seemed innocent. He poured her wine, made her sit down, asked her questions. So many questions. What's your favorite color? What kind of music do you like? What was your childhood like? It was overwhelming, but Lena forced herself to smile, to answer each question with grace, because deep down, she could feel it. Something was wrong. The charm had worked too well. Damien's attraction wasn't natural. It was unnatural. It was like an unbreakable bond had been forced between them, and now he couldn't stand the idea of her being away from him. At one point, she stood up, stretching. "I should go. It's late." Damien's entire body tensed, his jaw clenched. "You're leaving?" His voice was calm, but there was something off about it. Lena swallowed hard. "Yes, but I'll see you tomorrow." She forced a soft laugh, trying to keep things light. His eyes darkened. "No." Her breath hitched. "No, you're staying, just for tonight." The way he said it, it wasn't a question. It was a demand. A chill ran down Lena's spine. She had to get out of there. But she had seen this look before, in men who didn't take no for an answer. So she played it safe. She smiled, moving toward him slowly, brushing her fingers over his arm. "Not tonight, Damien. I have to go home. I have work tomorrow." He didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on hers, his breathing shallow. And then he did something she wasn't expecting. He laughed. It was quiet at first, almost amused, but there was no humor in it. "You don't need work, Lena," he said. "You have me now." Lena's stomach dropped. No. This wasn't love. This was possession. She tried to step back, but Damien's grip tightened around her wrist. "You don't understand," he said, his voice almost desperate. "I need you. I can't function without you. You belong to me now." Her chest tightened. This was dangerous. She had to fix this. Now. Lena forced a laugh, her heart hammering. "Damien, you're scaring me." His face softened immediately. "I don't mean to scare you," he murmured, stroking her cheek. "I just love you so much." Lena's stomach twisted. He wasn't lying. The voodoo charm had taken away his free will. He wasn't choosing to love her. He had no choice. And that was the worst part, because Damien didn't fall in love with her. He was trapped in it. And if she didn't break this spell, she might never escape. That night, Lena barely slept. Damien insisted she stay. She had no choice. He lay beside her, his arm draped possessively over her waist, holding her close. She felt his breath on her neck, his heartbeat against her back, and in the silence, she realized the truth. She was not his girlfriend. She was his prisoner. Tears burned behind her eyes. She had done everything to make Damien fall for her. But now, she had to do the opposite. She had to make him stop loving her. And the only way to do that was to undo the charm. The next morning, Lena waited until Damien fell asleep. Then she ran. She grabbed her purse, slipped on her shoes, and bolted out the door. Her hands were shaking as she hailed a cab, giving the driver an address she never thought she'd need again. A name she had sworn she would never say again. "Take me to Madame Amara." The small, dimly lit shop was exactly as she remembered. The thick scent of burning herbs, the flickering candlelight, and at the center of it all, Madame Amara. The old woman's piercing eyes studied her the moment she entered. "You came back," she said, her voice smooth, knowing. "The charm worked too well, didn't it?" Lena swallowed hard. "I need you to undo it." Madame Amara shook her head, clicking her tongue. "Undo it?" she repeated. Ah, my dear, you don't undo magic like this. You break it. Lena's hands clenched into fists. Fine. Tell me how. Madame Amara's eyes gleamed. You must make him hate you. Lena's heart stopped. What? She whispered. The old woman nodded. Only love willingly given can last forever. But forced love, it crumbles when poisoned. Lena's stomach turned. So you're saying I have to destroy his love for me? Madame Amara nodded. Completely. A lump formed in Lena's throat. She had spent years trying to win Damien's heart, and now she had to break it. That night, Lena returned to Damien's penthouse. He was waiting for her, pacing, his face tense. The moment he saw her, his eyes lit up. Where were you? He demanded. I thought something happened to you. Lena took a deep breath, and then she did what she had to do. She lied. She tossed her purse onto the table, shrugging. I was with another man. Damien froze. The room went silent. And then his expression darkened. You're lying, Lena smirked, stepping closer. Am I? His jaw clenched, his fists tightened. She could see the pain flicker in his eyes. It was working. She leaned in, her voice low, cruel. You were just a game, Damien, a challenge. She let out a small laugh. And now I'm bored. His breathing was sharp, uneven. His entire body was shaking. And then something shifted in his eyes. The love, the obsession, the need. It was breaking. A single tear slipped down his cheek, and Damien did the one thing she had prayed he would do. He let go. He stepped back. You're a monster, he whispered. Lena swallowed the lump in her throat. Good. That's exactly what she needed him to think, because only by making him hate her could she set him free, and herself too.